The Becoming Flame podcast broadcasts pure, unfiltered power exchange that stokes the flame of your being. Because it's time to remember. It's time to return. It's time to become flame. This episode of Becoming Flame is brought to you by PhenXX. PhenXX is a ritual luxury house devoted to erotic feminine embodiment. We create alchemical intimacy oils and functional fragrances infused with spagyric botanicals designed to soften the nervous system, open the body, and awaken life force vitality. Our formulations are crafted as tools of self-initiation. They are not cosmetic. They are not decorative. They are designed to be felt. They are designed to shift. Each oil facilitates a cellular shift into relaxation and receptivity, activating and opening up an archetypal femininity that your body knows and is yearning to step into. These oils allow the body to open safely into sensual intelligence, magnetism, and creative power. They open the libido and open creative sexual energy. When the body is safe, it softens. When it softens, it receives. When it receives, it creates. And when it creates, the entire world shifts. We believe that women who sit deeply in their bodies, in their erotic intelligence and sovereignty, become powerful creators of their lives and the environments around them. Our products are initiations into that coherence. Luxury in experience, devotional in use, transformational in effect. Get yours now at PhenXX.com. That's PhenXX.com. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Flame. I am your host, Kait Tregenza. Today I want to talk about the difference between being a feminist compared to being embodied in the feminine. Because there's quite a big difference between being an active feminist, believing in feminism, and being embodied in the feminine. And I think it's really important to touch on the difference between these two things, where they originate, and therefore what are the outcomes of each as a result. So feminism is taking the structure of patriarchy and trying to insert women into it, trying to insert a role with a quasi-equality into that existing structure. So patriarchy is a hierarchical structure with few on the top and a lot on the bottom. It's a pyramid or a triangle. It exists in hierarchy. It exists in structures. It exists in these dictatorships of, even if you don't call the government a dictatorship, it's this quasi-democracy. The choices within that so-called democracy where everybody has a say, let's leave that to the side because we don't want to get too off track with everything here, but the idea that you have a small number of people who make decisions, usually behind closed doors, on behalf of everyone, or a corporation where there's a leader or a leadership team that make decisions, or there's a board who make decisions on the direction, the values, the whatever else of the company, and then that moves forward. And there are people that drive that. We have rules and regulations that govern competition, that we have market forces that say that competition is okay and it's normal and it's healthy and it's what is required. And then we have the outcome of the society, which is productivity, efficiency, production of some kind. So we have to produce, we have to have an outcome, and the outcome has to be tradable. So someone needs to want to buy it. And so the god of this dynamic is money, power, control. So those who control tend to have more money and power, and those with more money tend to be able to control and have more power. Those with power tend to have more money and control. And so it's this sort of, the only circularity in that is money, control, and power. And so as women haven't been given access to money, control, or power, in feminism, the concept is to fight for women's rights and equal access to money, control, and power. And so you can say, well, that's a good thing, right? Women need to have more money, control, and power in order to be able to affect change, or in order to be even able to live within the dynamic of patriarchy, capitalism, the world that we live in. And so where is the origin of the desire to make change? Is it internal or is it external? And so when you're externally looking at a situation, a structure, a hierarchy, a world, like a corporation, whatever it is, a family even, a man even, and you are saying, how am I going to insert myself into that? It's a truly external way of being. That's a very masculine, it's not even masculine, it's patriarchal. It's competition based. It's capitalist. Because there's not very many differences between imperialism and capitalism. They're of the same father, which is patriarchy, which means I don't know how to create. So I see something that somebody else has created, and therefore I will take that. Yeah. So patriarchy is the deep belief in whatever can be created needs to be created through force, through theft, through other people's creations, or that the creations that are on this planet already exist and we need to extract them and we need to take them. We need to create such fear, scarcity, and disbelief in self that everyone else will come to work for those who have control, power, and money to function within the control and power and money that they circulate and that they control. And so every system, every ideology within the system is all about externality. So the people who even have the power, the people who even have the resources or the money or the control or whatever, version of capitalism you believe in and the way that you define it, I'm defining it through control, power, and money. They themselves do not believe they are the originators of the control, power, and money. And therefore, even their control, power, and money is externally sourced from them. And that trickles down an external belief system in everyone that participates in the patriarchy and the capitalism. So the ultimate powers in capitalist structures don't have internal, innate, unyielding, infinite power that is infinitely replenishing, because it's fake power, it's fake control. And money, we all know, is a fake, made-up, man-made device for trade. Why do you need money? Because you don't know that you're an infinite internal creator. So feminism is the existence of women inside an artificial made-up system that trades external power, external control, and external devices for trade that we call money or currency of any kind. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or fiat, it doesn't matter. And in that system, everyone believes and needs to believe in the resources of them being external, and that any external resource has infinite more value than anything internal. And so safety is derived externally, money is derived externally, finances of all kind are derived externally. And therefore you trade that amongst yourselves through the principles of scarcity, through the principles of lack, through the principles of urgency, and non-renewable resources. Many years ago, I did my master's in renewable energy, renewable technologies. And I was the only woman. So many stories of this. Like, how many of us all have this? And I was the only woman, and then I found the information that I needed. Anyway, so that's one of these stories. I was studying natural resource economics, and it was all about the fundamentals of finite trading of natural resources versus infinite natural resources, such as solar, such as wind, which is almost infinite, but it's unreliable. And that's sort of what I'm talking about here today, is that there's a belief in resources as being finite or infinite, but not reliable in patriarchy, right? So, you might believe that the earth can provide, but you don't necessarily understand the wisdom of the earth for that reliability, for that ability to tap in and go, yep, it's 100% reliable. And therefore, when you're a woman who knows that infinite resources exist within you, but you can't rely on them, or you don't know how to work with the ebbs and the flows, you don't know how to create structures and systems of containment around your infinite energy, it keeps pushing you back into the patriarchal system of lack, of fear, of trade, of hustle, of grind, of fighting for a seat at the table, where that table is designed in such a way to exclude you in every single way, to diminish you in every single way, to make sure that your infinite wisdom, your infinite capacity is never explored, never opened, and never available for you to tap into its infinite resource in a reliable, consistent, and trustworthy way. And so feminism, in many ways, if you think of it from that perspective, is a collective, intergenerational collective belief from women that they are worth more than what they've been given by the patriarchy, but still not yet tapped into the understanding of their true, infinite, reliable, consistent worth in the feminine embodied sense of who they are. And therefore they need to rely on this other system to feed them, to clothe them, to house them. And that the price of doing so would be to accept that they would never come into their infinite potential, but they would come into some kind of a reliable, consistent income stream or resource stream. in many ways, you can say it's very similar to the struggle that an entrepreneur would go through, or going, okay, I could have infinite untapped income, opportunity, wealth, expansion, creation, etc., by working for myself and knowing that who I am and what I can produce for this world could bring infinite value, infinite creativity. For me to step into the being of creation that I am, and expand that and share that and magnify that and multiply that through all these different ways and through all these different opportunities that I have as an entrepreneur. Or I accept my 9 to 5, even though I hate it, even though I'm not creative, even though it's repetitive work, even though, I know what my income is going to be for the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life. And I work day in and day out at this job until I die or until I retire. And every single day I'm in the energy of lack, scarcity, diminishment, reduction, minimization of self. So feminism really is a disembodiment and a form of lack. Because a woman who is fighting for the bare minimum still hasn't come in to know her worth, still hasn't come in to know her infinite capacity to create. And this is not shade. This is just the path of evolution that we are on. And so if you tap into a lot of Gen Z, a lot of millennials, they don't identify themselves anymore as feminists. And maybe some of them can articulate what I've just said, and maybe some of them can't yet. It's nebulous. It's a concept of like, well, I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel right. I also don't know that I don't want to go and get a job. And these really young people who are native to the internet, native to social media, native to this owning and this ownership of life and this ownership of creation, the idea of putting yourself last for a company is insane to them. And older generations have just simply looked at that and go, they have no dedication, they have no work ethic, they have none of this, the values of, basically the values of capitalism, by the way. Whose values are they? Well, it's the values that hold up and maintain a system of oppression and of slavery. And you've just been convinced, or these older generations have just been convinced that those values are their values and therefore they uphold them. And so when you have these generations after generations that never think in terms of infinite self-creation capacity, then holding a job for 50 years and getting a 1 to 2% pay rise year on year is progress. So if you think about feminism in that same vein, that we fight and we fight and we fight and we get 1 to 2% improvement year on year, how is that any different? If you can accept and appreciate that working for somebody else and working in capitalism and knowing that each year, because of inflation and the differential between inflation increases and pay rise increases, is that each year you're going to work for less money, then the same thinking can be and should be applied to feminism. We are still completely underrepresented in every aspect of capitalist patriarchal existence. The structures and the solutions of patriarchy do not and will never benefit women because it's not designed to. Feminism, the example would be women start fighting to be allowed to be clergywomen. So for example, women can be bishops, or popes or deacons or priests or whatever inside of the church. And so you fight for a seat within the misogynistic, patriarchal structures that fundamentally exist to keep women out. The structure was founded on misogyny, on true hatred and exclusion of women. And feminism fights for a seat within that structure. It fights for equality within a system that is built on the hatred and exclusion of women. And so you fight for inclusion instead, because you're excluded. So that's feminism. You have accepted that the structures of the world exist how they exist, and you are seeking a place or a more equal role within that structure. And you don't necessarily seek to change or dismantle the structure as the concept. The concept is women need more rights within the structure, within the world, how it is. Feminine embodiment. Doesn't look externally. It doesn't wonder how the world is. It doesn't look at the external structures and paradigms in place and then seek to carve a place for itself within that. Feminine embodiment asks you to know the deepest power that you be, the vessel of wisdom that you be, the capacity to create a world from the power that you be, from the body that you be, from the wisdom that you be, that you hold, that you channel through you, that you exude, that you create from. It asks not, where could I find a place for myself? It asks, what is the symphony of the frequency that I am? And how do I seek, via my own methods, via my own ways of being, to play that tune? And if in doing so, it doesn't fit in the structures of the world that exist currently, so be it. Shall they fall, or shall they be maneuvered so that the full being and the full symphony and the full expression of me as I am can play in full, without compromise, without change, without hesitation, and without kowtowing to somebody else, asking permission for somebody else. Feminine embodiment doesn't care about patriarchy, because patriarchy is a construct of the mind, and the body connected to the universal power of truth creates. It creates. And so if a very fragile structure that requires everybody else's fear, everybody else's uncertainty, everybody else's inability to dream bigger, to uphold it, and that's why it's so fragile, because it's so dependent on the world's fear, and then the cycling of fear all the time. If you step out of that fear, then you don't have fear of patriarchy anymore. You don't have fear of capitalism. You don't have fear of these other things. And what you realize that you had fear of was the immense power of your body to create a world in which all beings thrive. And you come to understand that the misogyny of the world has been adopted by you, not on purpose, but through osmosis, and that your only job now is to rid yourself of the misogynistic fears that make you feel smaller, that make you feel fearful of yourself and the power that you are, even though you don't know that's what you're scared of. You're just scared of yourself. and the, imposter syndrome and all of these other things start to become very, very clear that they're not about you at all, but about the power structure that will no longer benefit from your power, needing you to believe that you are nothing and nobody. And if you can actually start to live from the body wisdom that you exude, that is fully available to you from the body, not the mind. Feminism lives in the mind. It's a mental construct. Feminine embodiment lives in the body, and it's connected to creation. It's connected to the womb. It's connected to the technology system of woman embodied. And so going back to the example of feminism, asking to become women, to become a pope, women to become bishops, carving a seat at the table that is really not designed to amplify the intelligence of woman. The feminine embodiment way would be we start practicing woman law again. We practice as a fully formed collective of powerful women. We reclaim witchery, paganism, herbalism, alchemy, emotional expression, emotional alchemy, sexual expression, tantra, all of these bodies of wisdom that were completely and fully developed and practiced prior to this, in the scheme of things, very short period of amnesia. And we practice that. And we claim restitution. We demand that the church pay restitution for the atrocities and the genocide that was taken out on women over centuries, over millennia. Now, if we make this akin to Nazi Germany having to pay restitution for the atrocities committed against the Jewish people, is that, in Israeli people, Zionist people, whatever they were, however they identified, then we should make the church pay for the genocide against women. Now, women were not wiped out, and neither were Jews. So genocide doesn't mean that the race, the gender, the ethnicity, whatever it is wiped out. It does mean that millions and millions of people were sacrificed, massacred at the hand of one ideology over another. So the ideology was patriarchy over women being free, liberal, intelligent, creative, capable, and the leaders of this world. So feminine embodiment is embodying the rage of that genocide. It is embodying, alchemizing, and then using that alchemy to change the internal and the external. But for the time where women continue to suppress, eat, stifle, ignore, underutilize the rage of how these events in history have transpired to leaving an entire gender in trauma and CPTSD, in confusion, in disembodiment, in disassociation, in numbness, in pain, in confusion. There's no restitution. There's a world that asks women to mechanically give birth to a child, and 2 weeks later, 6 weeks at the maximum. In most progressive countries, it's 18 weeks, sometimes 22 weeks, 26 weeks. 26 weeks after giving birth to a life form. Even if it's 52 weeks after giving birth to a life form, right? Even if that's your version of progressive, that's your version of Mother's Matter, 52 weeks. The science doesn't add up to our societal beliefs around postpartum, around motherhood, around matrescence, around the wisdom of mothers, about the role of mothers. Psychologically, we understand the role of mothers. We understand what a society is created from present, fulfilled mothers whom are taken care of, who are filled up, who are supported, who are loved. We know what that society brings because we used to have it. We used to have a village model where it wasn't all on one mother, and it wasn't even all on one family. The nuclear model, the patriarchal model, the capitalist model does not benefit women and therefore does not benefit children and therefore does not benefit men. So the feminine embodiment work of restitution, of feeling that rage, of alchemizing that rage, is then demanding restitution for the atrocities that have been committed against women and that continue to have tentacles out into the present moment. Without demanding our restitution, we are perpetuating a victim cycle that is at a societal level. And it's all well and good to be focused on the individual healing, but an individual cannot heal to the fullest extent without the societal reconstitution and justice solved. Feminine embodiment work requires a look at the way in which the structures of our society are fundamentally flawed. And as the expression of her follows the intuitive path of creation into what that part of her is bringing forth. So feminism asks for a seat at a table that is fundamentally against her, in hatred of her, in design against her. And feminine embodiment says, you need to move the table out of this room, for there are not enough seats and the design is flawed. And most importantly, this is not how we seek a community to be structured anymore. And it doesn't do this with hate, with violence, with outrage, with uproar. It does it from the most calm, quiet sternness of a mother's love. A mother doesn't allow her child to come into danger. She knows boundaries. She knows strictness. She knows how to be a teacher and a guide and a communicator of those principles of safety, of cohesion, of togetherness, while still making sure that her child feels loved, safe, secure, attached, connected, and together, not only with her or in the immediate family unit, but in the society and the community. That is innate biology. That is the intelligence and the wisdom of a woman. And so we have been spending 50, 100, nearly 150 years now, demanding a slither of appreciation in a structure that is designed to disappreciate women. And so feminine embodiment and the epoch that we're in, the era that we're in of shifting from feminism as a mental construct and ideology into feminine embodiment, which is the reclaiming of, the returning to, and the remembering of the deep cellular understanding of who we be as women, as a collective, as a force, as a species, requires us to shift our focus and attention of what we are asking for. Very recently, I heard of a woman who is asking for the Church of Scotland to give her the biggest cathedral in Edinburgh. And She wants to turn that into a pagan house for witches, to practice witchcraft, to practice magic, to practice womanly arts, womanly crafts, sensual, sexual, feminine embodiment, feminine alchemy, all of these kinds of things that I'm talking about. She might say that in different words. Where are you accepting so much less because we have been programmed and hoodwinked into expecting less? And so shifting then our efforts and ideas into embodied femininity, embodied feminine mastery, embodied feminine creation. You know that you can create anything that you desire from being connected into and deeply, deeply held within your body. Your entire reality can change from shifting from your head or even from outside of your body to into your body, into your heart, then into your womb. Understanding the technology of the womb and its power to create and its power to birth the world in which women benefit, where hierarchies are replaced with hexagons, with cohesive hexagonal patterns like a honeycomb in a beehive, or circles where collective agreements are made for collective ways of being and existing in the world, where women collectively birth children, stories, companies, movements, gardens, whatever it may be, and where every single person's contributions to the whole are not only recognized but celebrated, because in a feminine embodied community where togetherness is the value and where collective agreement to thrive is the value, she who stays home with the children that day is understood and celebrated as the one who enabled all the other women to do whatever they needed to do that day, which is very different from the traditional patriarchal model where woman stays home and man goes to the work. And by the way, even in the scheme of patriarchy is about 5,000 years old. That's only a very modern aspect of patriarchy, because even prior to that, when we look at more like prior to the industrial age, so when we shifted from nomadic tribal people practicing mostly paganistic religions, when we were in a more tribal community-based, togetherness-based system of cohesion and collaboration, where majority of those earlier ways of being were, if they weren't a pure matriarchy, were more woman-led. When we shifted that into the agricultural times, you would still say that was more matriarchal and woman-led, because the men would go away from the village, from a central location where the village of the tribe were being, and women would collaborate and communicate effectively as a group on how they were to function. And men's role in that community was transient, because they would come and they would go as the hunting schedule required. And so, communities have been organizing themselves for generations prior to patriarchy. And time, or the passage of time, was innately feminine because she was the natural timekeeper. She was the natural synchronator. You know, she was the synchronometer between the moon rhythms, the tides, and her own flow. And so in a tribe, it wasn't that all women would sync up, because that would actually not necessarily build a tribe of strength if every single woman was menstruating at the same time. And so you would have almost like these subsets of women who bled together each one time per week of that month, and they would oscillate. And so that meant that at some point there was always someone who was in their vitality, and there was always somebody who was in their internal intuitive state. And that would keep a tribe extremely resilient and extremely functional, intuitively, deeply connected, but also vital and full of energy. And, you know, the functioning of that cohesively in the group would be really, 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 really powerful. And so being in that embodied sense of like, how do we actually structure a society around menstrual flow, around children and elders? How do we work together as a group of primarily women and children who are left from time to time without defenses of, you know, masculine protectors? And then when those protectors and those hunters come back, how do we integrate them into the society? How do we make sure that they have a place in everything? And so that's really so what when we're trying to talk about feminine embodiment compared to feminism, you have to look at the external realities of the two manifestations of thought around how feminism came to be. Feminism is a primarily survival instinct where women are in their survival bodies. They're disconnected from their menstruation. They're disconnected from their bodies. They're disconnected from their pleasure, from their womb wisdom, from their innate capacity to create. After generations and generations and generations of persecution, prosecution, burning, you know, that's all stored in the epigenetics. That's all stored in the body. That's all stored in the memory, the waters of every woman on this planet. The blood holds those memories and says, be cautious here. You're not yet safe. And so feminism comes from a primary place of, is there even safety here? Do you really have the allies and the capacities to take down this system? You're alone. This is a hyper-independent society. This is a hyper-independent place to be. Whereas in a world where feminine embodiment was the norm, your personal safety wasn't a question. Your personal safety within the community, within the tribe, wasn't something that was being questioned in that same way. You were menstruating together. You were raising children together. You were cooking and creating together. And patriarchy really came and very categorically knew that in order to succeed, it needed to pit women one against the other. And so these wounds of betrayal, these wounds of disconnection, not only from yourself, but from the tribe, from your sisterhood, from your menstrual cycle, and the sisters with whom you bled, the sisters with whom you sat in that red tent and you went through those journeys. And so women who would menstruate together that week, when I said the intuition and the insights and the wisdom that would come from that, that's really a group of women sitting together in red tent in a heightened intuitive, maybe a shamanic state, maybe a priestess state, whatever the tribe and the religion and the culture and the customs were of that time. And they would bring the prophecies, or they would bring the wisdom back to the rest of the group for that week ahead or for that month ahead or whatever, it may be. And so the divide and conquer aspect of the cogs all working together were such that women who were bleeding could go be so deep, be deeply held in that. They knew that even if they were breastfeeding, even if they were taking care of small children, that someone else would be feeding their children that week, that someone else will be taking care of their children that week. And not just someone else, their sisters, their grandmothers, their mothers. So they could drop in fully and completely, held by the sisters of that community, to be fully embodied in the menstruation and the wisdom and the letting go. And she would be shedding, not just for her, but for the collective, for the group amongst herself. And nobody thought she's just resting. Nobody thought she's just taking it easy. Oh, she's just faking. Gosh, she has to be so dramatic, right? Because we were all embodied, because we knew the power of menstruation, because we knew the power of our blood, of the lineage, of the letting go, of the season of autumn, of winter. And we could oscillate between, and we could co-connect between sisters who were in summer, in spring, with those who were in winter and autumn. That the cohesion and the functionality of that community thrived when every single woman fully in her body got to be in the season of life that she was in that way, and that all seasons could in fact cohabitate and co-create in that togetherness, in that cohesion. A community of femininity could thrive by and through embodiment. So she would bring back the wisdom of her bleed and meet her sister who had just been ovulating, who had just been, in her vitality, putting into practice, putting into form, putting into manifestation that which she had received in her previous intuitive, guided, held, community-based bleed, and the wisdom of that could be met. And so these cities and these villages, when we say it takes a village to raise a child, it's not just about childcare. It is about the wisdom and the enactment of that wisdom into a society that has space for women to be women. And so when we look at feminism, feminism is fundamentally asking for a place for a woman to be in a man's world. Therefore, can this woman disconnect, disassociate, numb long enough to function in masculinity, function in patriarchy, to function in capitalism, which is all about efficiency, productivity, and outputs? And we celebrate the women who are capable of disembodying long enough that they can succeed in a masculine structural capacity. For those women who don't have any ability to disassociate from their bodies, they will never succeed in that structure because it's a requirement. It's a requirement to be disembodied. If your fundamental being and your fundamental reason to be on the earth at this time is the embodiment, is the bringing back of the spirit, of the femininity into the body technology, into the womb wisdom, into the womb operation of creation, you are never going to succeed in capitalism because it's not the blueprint you are here to follow. And what has been so successful, I think, in the delaying of feminine embodiment and the feminine creativity and the rise of that and the remembering of that and the return of the female has been that the majority of feminine embodied women who have the codes to be the feminine embodied creator, creatrix, bringing that mother energy, bringing that success here, is that they're actually these women are highly advanced, highly intelligent, wired for success. They're very intelligent because they tap into the highest possible intelligence of all, because the wisdom from their womb makes its way to their mind. It's claircognizance, right? Sometimes you're tapped so deeply into your womb wisdom that you just think it's your mind. You think it's your intelligence. You think it's yours to own. And that's the linkage that you still have back into capitalism. That your mind is for you and the purposes of your advancement only. But in feminine embodiment, true matriarchal, true community-based environments, the wisdom that you have and the intelligence that you have was never yours. It was ours. It was ours to benefit from. We as a community would benefit from the specific capacity that you bring in, the channeling that you bring in. And again, we bleed together because it's our heightened, intuitive point of the month. The role of the menstruator is to sit within the tent of receivership. So as she's bleeding out, she's also bringing in. And the circle would strengthen that every single woman is bringing in their part of the dialogue. And at the end of that week, they would sit and they would gather what the purpose, or let's say the received wisdom and information required for the group to benefit. Maybe it's very specific and actionable, like we need to move. There are dangers on the horizon. There's wolves coming, or whatever it may be. Or it's time for us to create a body of work in this community that, only the collective notes that all of we have together are going to bring forth and create. And so I hope it's starting to become very, very obvious that feminine embodiment cannot exist in a hyper-independent, hyper-isolated world, because women are coherent, cohesive, connective objects. We need the others to complete the transmission to its fullest and completest, highest perspective. One of the absolute strongest forms, geometric forms on this planet is the honeycomb hexagonal, cohesive hexagons. So what you find in honeycombs, what you find in beehives. And every additional hexagon to that structure adds exponential strength. So you have 3 and you may compound the strength, but as you get more and more and more, the exponentiality of the strength is something that people don't understand. And so if we look at nature and we look at the understanding of women in cohesive, collaborative, community-based organizations where they fit together, they interlock, and more women come together, the exponential strength and tuning of that structure is incredibly strong. It's the strongest, literally the strongest. So when we look at graphene or graphite or any of these other really, really, really strong material sciences that have been either created or recreated in lab forms, they have taken that hexagonal cohesive pattern as the foundation for strength. And so graphene is naturally occurring, and it also has that same it also has that same structure. It also has that same exponential strength incurring in the larger and the more comprehensive of the space, of the size. And so that's why these beehives are so strong. And natural beehives, I'm not talking about ones that you actually literally break apart because they're designed that way. So in nature, a beehive is so strong. And the hive itself works for the hive. There's no one individual bee that's like, well, you guys go and do your thing, but I'm building myself over here. That ensures an unsurvivability and unsafety. And so coming back into the safety of feminine embodied structures and solutions in society that honors women in their bodies. Where do you first find your safety? Internally, in your individual system. But then in addition to that, we find the incredible capacity to save ourselves from our own safety. So we find the incredible safety within ourselves. And as safe, secure women, we add safety and we add security every time we add another woman who is in tune, who is in alignment, who is in frequency with us. And so the collective of women breeds and cultivates safety and security for the collective. And if you are a patriarchal system who, despite at the beginning was probably very embryonic and, not very organized and not very sophisticated, and it remains unintelligent, to be honest with you. But if you knew the strength of women came from the safety they had within themselves and within each other, you would design a system to break those bonds of safety, to break those bonds of sisterhood, and to break the safety that they would feel within themselves. And the easiest way to do that would be through the betrayal of one to another, and then the requirement for you to choose between either your child or yourself and your sister. And so what I think that they found out was bonds of sisterhood were extremely, extremely unbreakable until you had to put it against the bond of motherhood. So they found that motherhood was stronger than sisterhood, and they attacked there. And that is a betrayal that each of us carry within us. Either being betrayed or doing the betrayal. Because in an embodied, cohesive, collaborative togetherness, community of sisters who know that they are stronger together, who know that they are their greatest asset. To betray another woman, to betray another sister, gives an unbelievable pain. An unbelievable pain. So it's not just the pain of being betrayed. It's the pain of betrayal as well, of betraying. And we all carry both, right? We carry the wound of both. And so if we are to find true safety within our feminine embodiment, it needs to be through the healing of this sisterhood, the healing of our own self-betrayal, the betrayal of the embodied woman, and the betrayal that you betrayed the body, right? You betrayed the intelligence, the wisdom, and the capacity, the technology of the body that is so much stronger and so much more powerful and so much more everlasting and infinite than this external power, than this external control. But when you've never seen the external controls of the external power, the extraction, the violence, all of this. It's very similar to how capitalist imperialist systems took power so quickly over indigenous cultures that were based in togetherness, that were based in feminine embodiment. You do not know how to look for a threat that you innately have never believed exists. If you come from a cohesive, unity-based, togetherness-based society where everyone and their actions and their beliefs and their thoughts and their whole consideration of life is about how do we make life better, more inclusive, more valuable, more thriving, more pleasurable, more joyful, more, just better for everyone inclusively. And you meet a group of people who do not carry this frequency, who do not carry this embodiment, these beliefs. You don't immediately abandon everything you believe in and adopt new thoughts. That's not, if you've never known unsafety in your life, in your body, if you don't have registration and you don't have receptors of unsafety in your body, when an unsafe threat arrives in the form of people whom you know up until that life point experience as safe, loving, together, cohesive beings, and then they attack you, and then they do all of these heinous, horrific, horrendous things to you. It takes you a long time to understand, to put your mind into the reality of these people are not like us. They look like us, they speak like us, but they're not like us. They don't carry the same frequency. They don't carry the same agenda. They do not believe in the same source of infinite loving power. They do not believe that unity is the ultimate goal. They believe that disunity and separation and lack and control and power over another and extraction is the goal. And that's how it happened, right? And by the way, that same so-called naivety that many loving embodied women, not maybe embodied, but loving, and women who are on their path of embodiment, who meet narcissists, who meet psychopaths, who meet sociopaths, who meet these guys, when women see the potential in everyone they meet, it is the reason that feminine embodiment exists, because we hold the codes to seeing a potential for this planet, for this humanity, for our lifetimes, where unity consciousness, where togetherness, where community, where sisterhood and thriving in togetherness and embodied wisdom and embodied power can exist again. And for those of us who have met narcs, who have met these extractors, but seen their potential anyway, I know that we are attacked as naive and, Bambis of proportionate colossal failures. But I see it as we are the code activators on this planet right now to help us move back into embodied femininity, where the body holds codes for togetherness, where the body holds codes for our potentiality to be back in unity. And even if it doesn't happen in the lifetime that we're currently in, I know there has to be some reason why so many of us have come in with these codes and so many of us have found these truly traumatic relationships and still chosen love anyway. That's an activation onto this earth that is so unbelievably powerful. And you have been through the absolute fire for that. You have been decimated in so many aspects of you, except really ask yourself in this moment, Did you ever stop believing in love? Did you ever stop believing in community and togetherness and in a world where everybody lives as their brightest and fullest and completest potential, where potentiality is realized? I think that's, if you don't know if you are on this planet to embody femininity and to bring it to life, and if that's been your path, no, you are part of the initiating women who are bringing this back. That's the sign to you that you are here for such incredible work in the feminine embodiment space. Because being a woman to hold and see and understand feminine embodiment in that realest and rawest and most extraordinary way, that's what you need to know. It's right there. It's that even in the face of harm and hurt and abuse, you can still separate that individual's actions from a collective whole, from a collective humanity. And you can still love humanity, and you can still believe in humanity and womanhood and sisterhood and children growing up in safety. I don't know a single man who can do that. To hold the complexity of those, not only thoughts, but experiences and frequencies, to alchemize the incredible abuse, pain, hatred, trauma, whatever it is that you went through, and still hold unconditional love for not only your children, but for women, for sisterhood, for yourself. That is an extraordinary superpower of feminine embodied being. And if you can learn to not be shattered by the trauma of that, and learn to not be shattered by the nervous system collapse of that, but train your nervous system to say, I am here for this, I am made for this, my mind needs to get on board, my nervous system needs to get on board, and tap back into the communities of feminine embodied living that are in your epigenetics, that are fully formed and whole. Because, and by the way, I know that they're fully formed and whole because you love humanity anyway. Right now, hand on heart, you love humanity. You are here for this. Where do you think that love for humanity comes from? It's from the fully formed epigenetic imprint, the epigenome of your being tells you the blueprint of connected feminine embodied living, where community, where tribal organizations, where women thrived raising children together collectively. If you believe that somewhere in the world your tribe exists, your village exists, your people exist, it's in your epigenome. Your epigenetics are guiding you. Your blueprint of your soul is guiding you back to recreating this. This is a time on the planet where patriarchy is collapsing. Capitalism is collapsing. You are here for this. You know you've been here for this. You just didn't know what this is, right? And so here it is. The activation you need is to start working with your epigenetics, your epigenomes of togetherness, of feminine embodiment, where you come back and you see and you feel and you know what it is. And here's the difference between feminism and feminine embodiment in making that happen. Feminism goes to the street to fight, to protest, to bring it down, to externalize the power, of the destruction creation of the new. Okay? So feminists are still operating from power is external, creation is external, resources are external, and the patriarchy is stable and everlasting. Activating your feminine embodiment through the genetics, the epigenetics of you, through the blueprint that you have come here at this time to enact, is where it comes from. So the internal activation of you being the woman who is available for, in this moment, not in 20 years' time, in this moment, in this second, who is available for true togetherness, for true community, who would never take another person's work, who would never take another person's signature, who is here for her own, who is here for her own expression of self out into the world, where you can access all of the pain, all of the rage, all of the shadow that is keeping you out of it. The first step is not create the world that you want to live in, okay? The first step is feel all the rage, feel all the betrayal, feel all of the emotion that has been keeping you out of your body or not fully inhabited in the body, not fully embedded in the body first. The emotional alchemy work comes first. It's not just enough to know your shadow anymore. It is a requirement for women who are leading this revolution to alchemize the rage, the betrayal, the grief, the sorrow, the sadness, the deceit, the disgust, the wrath, the rage, every single potent emotion that you feel that is keeping you outside of your embodied being in true feminine power of creation, you are fully in your body. And so wherever the body is being rejected because it feels too much, or the difficulty of those emotions feel too much, that's where you start. You feel it, and instead of running from it because it hurts too much, you go into that fire. You become the flame. You become the flame, and you burn so hot that you can finally use the potency of those emotions to alchemize. And what that alchemizes into, you have no control over. What that alchemizes into is who you are here to be. Who you are here to be doesn't come from your head. It is who you are here to be. It is who you are here to be. When I do this, I use the inspiration, the guidance, the mentorship of the PhenXX, of the dragon. If you are someone who's more like, no, I prefer like someone like Joan of Arc, whatever, my ancestors, whoever it is. What about fire herself? Have you ever sat down and had a conversation with fire? What do I need to know about you to alchemize here? Because I'm burning. The world is burning. It's going to be uncomfortable externally as long as it's uncomfortable internally. Because when you don't have deep safety in your own body and deep trust that your body knows how to emotionally alchemize everything on this planet, you are outside of your body, and therefore you are looking in. You are outside of the world looking in. You are outside of control looking in. We aren't outside of control. Control is made up. In a true community of unity consciousness, we are all working toward the same goal. It doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to understand that at the moment, in the external world, in the structures of society that we live in, we are not working towards the same goal. And you should be fucking angry about that. So give yourself permission to be. Give yourself permission to feel the depth of that rage, anger, sadness, despair, hopelessness, because that's where power to alchemize it is hiding. It's in that. So all of the things that we've been told in patriarchy is that we feel too much, we're too emotional, we're too feeling. Of course, they wanted to make us feel the very thing that holds our power. Embodied women feel it all. It's the role that we're here to bring, to catalyze, to alchemize the change we are here to see. And then after you have done the emotional alchemy work and you have transformed yourself into the truer embodied version of you, that's when you can start to attract the tribe. And as all women stand in their embodied feminine creative power, the magnetism of that to create tribe, to create community, to create change, to topple down the structures of oppression, of slavery, of injustice, of extraction, will happen alongside the creation of this magnetic force that is bringing women together back into cohesive reality with nature, back into coherence, back into truth, back into the embodied way of operating from truth. Your only work is to feel what you feel, to do everything they told you not to do everything in your power to sit in stillness, to sit in circle with women if you can, and if you cannot, gather your ancestors, gather your crystals, your totems, whatever it may be, and sit and circle and bleed. Gain the wisdom, and that each month you receive your assignments from your blood wisdom. Your blood contains water, and your blood contains your genetics, your blueprint, your personal pathway, guidance system forward. If you are disconnected from your blood, from your body, from your womb, from your body technology, your feminine technology, you will feel unsafe. You will feel disembodied. You will feel disconnected. Because the connection point, the safety point, and the knowledge point, the wisdom point, is the womb, is the blood. It is the way that we connect. And even modern disconnected women, where do you feel safest in the world than a woman's bathroom? You will connect more deeply with any stranger in a bathroom, asking for a tampon, a cup, a pad, whatever. That is bonding, that is biological, that is innate, that is epigenetics in action. Our blood is our bond of togetherness, our intuitive wisdom. When women are bleeding together, there is an innate and primordial trust. Oh, we are working together. At some level, you still are, but we are moving towards that being in considered tangible action towards an outcome. We're not there yet as a collective community, as a population, but we are becoming that way again as more and more women stand up to understanding the power of their sensuality, their sexuality, their womb, their blood, their rights, their menopause, their postpartum, their birth. These are all technologies of feminine embodied wisdom. And so It is not that it is bad to be a feminist. It is that it is keeping you tethered to a world that ultimately doesn't want you in it. And so it's time now to rise into a bigger reality for all of us, men included, but particularly for our children, particularly for our daughters. And it is time for us to come home to the body, to return to her, to remember her. And her exists in a community of togetherness, in sisterhood, in collaboration, in cohesion, in truth, in authenticity, in being who she is so freely and completely that her own blueprint, her own spark, her own note, her own thread in the tapestry is free to express itself, to be itself, to follow that path. And that is why feminine embodiment work is not just about touching yourself and having an orgasm. It is about the ultimate goal of building this new world where everybody is valued, men, women, and children. Not where some women who disconnect from themselves get a seat at the table and make themselves sick doing it. Not sure what I mean? Go and do some research. How many women at the very tops of areas in patriarchy who have career success, company success, comes at the price of their bodies, whether that's burnout at the very, very lowest level of it, autoimmune disease, endometriosis, some kind of cervical or infertility issues. The body holds the wisdom. And if we keep living outside of the body and favoring the money, the power, and the control of artificial external sources, we will never realize the ultimate goal, which is a fully functional world in cohesion, in coherence, in truth, and in freedom. I love you all.